So today we have Rachel Weidemann from EHS giving us the presentation on hazard assessments for the laboratories. So Rachel is the Research and Laboratory Safety Manager with the Department of EHS at the university. And she is responsible for the program development and implementation for all campus research and laboratory safety programs to ensure compliance with federal, state, local, and university regulations and standards. Rachel holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Medical Laboratory Sciences, Master of Health Administration, graduate certificate in Bioinformatics, and she is currently completing a Master of Biotechnology in May this year, and also a Master of Public Health in Infectious Disease and Zoonoses in May 2026. She has already applied to start a PhD in pathobiology, virology in summer this year. And Rachel is a Lean Six Sigma belt, black belt, and certified medical laboratory scientist through the American Society for Clinical Pathology. She joined K-State EHS in October of 2022 as a safety and health officer. And in May last year, she was promoted to the Safety and Health Senior Manager for Research and Laboratory Safety. Prior to joining K-State, she was the Assistant Biosafety Officer and Senior Specialist for Laboratory Safety at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, a Select Agent Specialist at the USDA National Bio and Agricultural Facility, and a Medical Laboratory Scientist at essentially at USDA. All right, with that, I'll hand over to Rachel.
Thank you, Signage. So today I'm here to have kind of an informal discussion on hazard communication and lab signage and the implementation of our new program in 2024. So our program is based on compliance with the OSHA HAZCOM standard, hazard communication standard, which is 29 CFR 1910-1200. This is administered by the Kansas Department of Labor, which is KDOL. This standard provides a coherent approach for classifying chemicals and communicating hazards on labels and safety data sheets. This is aligned with the globally harmonized system for classification and labeling of chemicals, GHS, which are the pictograms we're going to talk about in a little bit. And the requirements for compliance include SDS maintenance, labeling of chemicals, and training. So these are the GHS pictograms that I just mentioned. You'll see these on chemical containers and in SDSs. This program is also ensuring compliance with the OSHA PPE standard, 29 CFR 1910-132. So any PPE that you wear, eyes, face, head, clothing, respiratory, is to be provided, used, and maintained wherever necessary by reason of hazards. So this is a reason that we conduct a hazard assessment. The requirements of the PPE standard are that we are conducting a hazard assessment for every space in operation. We do a PPE assessment to discuss, based on our hazard assessment, which PPE is necessary to protect from identified hazards, and that employers provide PPE. So the reason that we are implementing a new program at K-State is that we care about safety in all areas. Documented hazard assessments help us to facilitate emergency response, hazard communication. They provide you protection working in a lab or research facility, and having this program campus-wide helps us achieve compliance. So when hazard assessments are conducted, commissioning, so before you initiate work, however, this process is new in 2024, so all laboratories will be going through the same process across campus. You should also update your hazard assessment whenever changes in your work occur that change the hazards that are present. This will change the results of your hazard assessment, your PPE assessment, and then your hazard communication, which is your signage. And I suggest reviewing on an annual basis just to ensure that nothing has changed. So I'm introducing a new worksheet. It was in a Word document that Dr. Calvo has completed, and she has the new signs already. But we put it into a Microsoft form for ease for both of us. So the form just introduces that K-State EHS, Research and Lab Safety, commissions each campus on laboratory or research location through completing a laboratory hazard assessment. All laboratories on campus must have one completed on file with EHS at all times. Hazard assessments provide information that aid workers inform hazardous materials, emergency response, and facilitate emergency communication. And updated hazard assessments and lab signage are two of our most important research safety tools on campus. So there's a few different sections within the hazard assessment that I just wanted to introduce before I let you guys complete the assessments on your own. The first section is your lab information. This is really basic. So where is your lab? Like, what is your physical location and department associated, and who is responsible for this laboratory? So this could be the principal investigator, lab manager, lab member, safety coordinator. It's important for me to mention here that if you have 5 laboratories that all have the same hazards, you may complete one form and list all those lab numbers on the same form. If you have 5 laboratories that all have different operations and hazards, you must complete 5 separate forms. Section 2 is the actual hazard assessment. So in this section, you're going to describe what does your laboratory do? What kind of laboratory do you have? Is it mainly for teaching, research, or diagnostics? And then specific considerations for chemicals, regulated substances, controlled substances, the equipment that you use. If you do want to note on here high value equipment in EHS, we can use that information to help you protect that equipment should there be an emergency. If you have a -80 freezer with samples, that if it went down in a power outage, that would be devastating to your research, please let us know on here as one example. Safety equipment and tools available. Do you have a fire extinguisher in your lab? Do you have a fire blanket? Do you work with animals? Do you ship dangerous goods? Do you do nanoparticle work? Do you have radiological materials, biological materials, additive manufacturing, so like 3D printing, resin printing, filaments? Do you have compliance protocols with research compliance on campus, so IVC, IACUC, IRB? Administrative elements, do you have lab-specific procedures like SOPs for your lab or your department? PPE, are you in the respiratory protection program or hearing protection program? And any ergonomic concerns that you would like us to look at. So I like to bring this up and remind everybody before I talk about the PPE assessment that PPE is the least effective control that we have to protect you against hazards. So the first thing we're going to do when we look at your hazards that you identify in your hazard assessment is decide if there's any that we can eliminate. I understand in research that is not very common that we can eliminate. Then we look at substitution. Can you substitute a toxic chemical for a less toxic chemical and produce the same results? Sometimes you can, often you cannot. That's when we move into engineering controls that isolate you from your hazards, such as fume hoods, biosafety cabinets, clean benches, laminar flow hoods. And then we also often implement administrative controls alongside these other controls. This would include SOPs, procedures. I know your department has its own chemical hygiene plan. That's an example of an administrative control. Anything that helps people understand how they should work. And then lastly, we look at PPE. The reason why PPE is the least effective control measure is because PPE can fail. PPE relies on consistent and proper use from each individual at all times. We'd rather protect you through engineering controls, eliminating, substituting, but we still have PPE in case you have failure in the other controls. So section 3 is a PPE assessment. In this section, you're going to describe all PPE required for work in your laboratory based on the hazards that you work with. So you'll denote what PPE is required for entry into your laboratory and work in your laboratory based on what you work with. So all PPE can be listed in this one section. And then finally, after you list out your laboratory information, your hazard assessment, and complete your PPE assessment, then you pull all this together into your laboratory sign, what you would like displayed on your laboratory for entry requirements, for access control, who should be contacted in the case of an emergency, what PPE should be worn, your GHS pictograms from your chemicals, the NFPA 704 diamond, which is what emergency response personnel are trained on. So if there's a lab fire, the fire department is going to come in there and they're going to look at your door sign and they're looking for the NFPA 704 diamond. That's how they're trained. So fire, police, other emergency response personnel, that's what they use to communicate with each other how to respond to a hazard. Biosafety levels, if you do work with biologicals. Radiation use, do you have radiation or lasers? And then any other hazards you feel are important for someone to know about before they enter your lab. I did want to highlight something that I'm really happy about putting on the lab sign that I feel like provides respect and autonomy to researchers in their labs. I am asking you to define access control for your laboratory. Just because I have a key does not mean that I have access. So I did put some broad categories, but I also give room for you to denote what access means to you. I also have on here, can emergency responders safely enter? And if so, what considerations are there for them? And I also have a spot for facilities and maintenance. Can they enter at any time to conduct maintenance? And if so, what considerations should they know? So that's just showing out more of that. And then for the lab sign, for the GHS pictograms, there's a spot for you to select which ones are applicable to your lab. This counts for your whole inventory. So stuff that's in storage, stuff that you're actively using, stuff that may be in there that you have no idea is in there, that you don't use. These pictograms will represent everything that is in the space. And then here's the diamond and what it looks like. The diamond information is denoted on your SDSs for each chemical, and for your space, you're going to put the highest ranked of your inventory. So say you have something that is a 0 flammability hazard, but you also have a chemical that's a 3. For your lab sign, you're going to denote a 3, because that is the highest potential hazard that you have within the space. After you complete this assessment, which I'll make sure you guys all get a link to the assessment to the Microsoft form, I'm going to receive a notification, and I will prepare a lab sign draft for you and send it to you and Signage so you guys can look over it and let me know if there's any corrections that should be made. And then after that's done, I would ask that you print it in color and post it on any entrance to that laboratory. That means if you have doors inside laboratories, like doors in between laboratories, that sign should be on the side of the door entering that lab as well. So you have it in the hallway, in the internal entrances, anywhere that I may be able to access your lab needs a sign. The color posting is required for compliance with the OSHA HAZCOM standard. And here's what the new lab signs look like. You may have seen a teaser of them or a few of them around, but at the top, this just tells us kind of what type of lab you are. This will be your building and room, and if there's an alternate door that can access the same room, I can put that on there. So if you have like a sub door, like, I don't know, for example, let's say you're in King 100, but King 100-1 can also enter this lab, I can put that on here. For room contacts, it's important to me that I have a 24/7 phone here. If something happens at 3 in the morning, I need to be able to reach somebody. That is the only case that we will use this phone, but we need to know how to get a hold of you after hours. The first call after hours is always going to be the police department, but then it'll be triaged to EHS if necessary to respond, and then we will contact you if necessary. Based on the hazard assessment, I should have most of the information I need to respond to a situation, but we would still notify you and call you in if necessary. Access requirements, this is where I'll put on here who can access the lab, if prior approval is needed for access to the lab, and if you do say, like, yes, facilities can come in here if there's a water leak, if you say that facilities needs to know, for example, I'm trying to think of a good example, but if you say facilities can enter, there's an emergency, but facilities needs to know that I have this equipment running at all times, I would let them know on here. PPE, this is where we put all of your PPE assessment, and whatever goes in here is going to be the expectation for entry for your space. So if you say people working in your space need safety goggles, a lab coat, closed-toed shoes, and gloves, anyone entering your space is expected to wear that at all times. And then down here, your GHS pictograms, any of them that you denote are present in your lab, I'll make sure on your sign. If they're not, they'll be removed. Your diamond will be completed with the values that you give. This is for radiation. If you don't have it, it will be removed. Same with biohazards here. Special hazards gives me the opportunity to list something unique, like if you have additive manufacturing running, you have filaments, maybe special equipment. And then this little QR code will take you to our website, and we're building that part out still, but it will define all of these for anybody. So if somebody comes up to your lab and they're like, I don't know what this means, and what is different between this one and this one, they can scan this QR code and it will define what that means. And then lastly, the date of your hazard assessment will be on here, the date that you posted it. And then I had a request for safety coordinator review being posted as well. So I know that I went through that process fairly quickly and that it's a new process for everybody. So I just want to let you know that I'm here to help with any part of it. And my goal is to collaborate with you on compliance. So my contact information is on here. It's on the EHS webpage.